To be quite honest, it's pretty annoying to have to continue to cover this subject. But I have kids. I care about the world they are growing up in, as well as the world we hand them. As a person who has always tried to be fair and understand others, it's frustrating. How can you support a movement that claims to want equality or fairness for one group, but it's clearly trampling on the rights and fairness shown to another group? That's why you're starting to see the LGB without the T trending more and more. You think a majority of gay people agree with this nonsense? The trans bowel movement is hurting its own movement and others simultaneously. This approach turns tolerant people into skeptical people. It turns people on the fence into what's perceived as hateful. And it turns hateful people into violent people. As you can see in this video, the violent threats against women are somehow being tolerated in the name of this movement. Let's see what Sarah Jane Baker has to say here.
I was going to come here and be really floppy and be really nice and say, yeah, be really lovely and queer and gay. No, if you see a TERF, punch him in the fucking face. Gay. No, if you see a TERF, punch him in the fucking face. Gay. No, if you see a TERF, punch him in the fucking face.
So we're straight up calling for violence against women. And the term TERF, right? What is it? Trans exclusionary radical feminist, right? By definition, it's usually women. Obviously, some men can be classified that as well. But generally, you know, J.K. Rowling's and other people are called TERFs. Now, they're not called TERFs after careful analysis of everything they say, you know, and gets them labeled as this supposedly hateful term. They're called TERFs if they say anything about trans in sports, if they say anything, you know, about the disregarding of women in the name of the trans movement. So essentially, you're saying attack any woman or person that says anything contrary to the trans movement. So just imagine that if you flip that around and somebody were to say, I was going to come here today and, you know, talk about unity and this, that. But you know what? Fuck that. If you see a trans person, punch them in the face. Could you imagine if we flipped that? All right? Let's hear this one more time.
Being queer and gay. No, if you see a TERF, punch him in the fucking face.
Holding an Antifa flag, calling for violence against primarily women. Now, for those who don't know, this Sarah Jane Baker, okay, this is a woman from the UK, a woman, term used lightly, of course. I don't want a dead name, Sarah Jane here, okay? Served 30 years in prison, okay? 30 years in prison, and of course, we just got hit with a pay for the ad to watch more. So now this person here, Sarah Jean, is 50 years old, was released from prison 10 weeks ago. I believe this article, 2019 or 2020. So out of jail for a few years now, okay? Served 30 years in prison. Now the charges against them initially, I believe, let's look at it here. I got my first 7-year sentence in 1988 for beating up my stepmother's brother, and the rest of the time was added when I was already inside. I was one of many working class people whose default was to go to prison. So it was a kidnapping charge, I believe, an abduction charge, an assault charge, and it got increased all the way, okay, to 30 years. Now this person spent 30 years in prison, comes out, and is calling for violence against women. And we're just allowing this. We're saying this is okay. But because trans people have went through things. And yes, all groups have went through things. And of course, we all know gays have went through things. We all know trans people at some points. But let me also tell you something. There's never been another movement in the history of civilization, okay? Not women's rights, which are the main thing being infringed upon currently. And as a man with daughters, I can't stand for that, okay? Black rights, native, you name it, gay rights, you name any quote unquote Muslims in America, especially after 9/11 or in general when Christianity and Christians were controlling the narrative even more, which they were for a long time when conservative media had control. There's never been a movement in history that has went right to the front line like this movement. All right, and obviously Dave Chappelle has spoken about it, and other people have referenced this as well. Now, not only is this movement moving at warp speed, we are straight up ignoring the fact that women are getting trampled on in the name of this movement. And I have daughters. It's not about being a radical feminist. And even if I didn't have daughters, I would hope that I would have enough of a brain to stand up against things that are incorrect or unfair. Because I've always been the person to stand up for things that are unfair, right? I've been called a bleeding heart liberal a lot more than anything else as I was growing up. I'm still left wing for the most part. I lean right on some issues, but what this is doing, and all these issues are doing, is bringing me more and more to the right little by little. Because now the things that I used to admire Democrats for, and I used to be more on the side of Democrats and more brainwashed probably, because both sides are horrendous, but when I was younger, is that Democrats were primarily anti-war, which they are not anymore, and Democrats were free speech. They were the party of free speech, and now that's completely flipped. And now the right wing, who used to be the ones that used to love censoring people, are way more pro-free speech. But they're also pro-censorship when it's convenient for them too. So don't get it twisted and think that, they're all about total free speech either, because they're not. But back to the subject at hand here. This person is openly calling for violence against women. A felon who spent 30 years in prison is calling for violence against women. And what are we gonna do about it? Right? My gay people out there, we need more of this trending hashtag. We need more of this. And it's not about hate, but we need more of this. Because this is how it starts, right? LGB without the T. And it doesn't mean, trans people should be treated terribly or beaten. But let me tell you something. They keep getting close to people's kids and doing all this weird shit with the twerking around people's kids and all the crazy stuff that's going on. What do you think? You think there's more of a chance or less of a chance of violence increasing? You think you're helping violence? You think you're helping this group become more accepted by co-signing and allowing the things that are going on? Absolutely not. You're furthering the divide. You're making people less tolerant. So we need more and more gay people to stand up. You see this trending on Twitter recently, LGB without the T. We need more of this because that's the only cure for this. People within their own communities need to be the people to call out people doing things like this and screaming things like this to them.
It is fluffy and be really nice and say, yeah, be really lovely and queer and gay. No, if you see a TERF, punch him in the fucking face.
And people are cheering for it, cheering for violence. I would never condone violence against any group unless it's self-defense, okay? But they're condoning violence. This person, this woman, in the biggest quotations you ever seen in your life, Sarah Jane Baker, convicted felon, 30 years in prison, is calling for violence against women. So, what are we gonna do, everybody? Are we gonna allow this to fly under the radar because we're liberals? Because somebody might be a liberal and they want to stick to the liberal script and stick to the liberal direction? Or are more people that are on the left gonna speak up? And it shouldn't take the LGB without the T trending for you to go, oh, well, even gay people don't like this. Maybe I should say something. You should be saying something regardless. We shouldn't have men, right? Biological men body slamming women in sports and, elbowing women and wrestling women. And even you put a dude on a bike, right? He's even blowing natural born women out the water. There's a reason for these things. There's a reason for a difference in sports. It's not hateful. There's a reason to say, don't twerk in front of kids. It's not hateful, and it's definitely a reason to say calling for violence against anyone, especially women who fought for a long time to get where they are. Okay, I got daughters. Even without daughters, I would like to believe my stance would be the same. So what are we gonna do about it? Love y'all.